get the garden going, because I think it's very important to do. So just wanted to add that comment.
It's a great point. Thanks, Jay. Lorraine? Oh, you're on mute, Lorraine.
Councillor Dwyer may have the answer to this, but I wondered if they have small plots for community gardens. Will they be opened again this year? Do you know?
Do you know what? I don't know for sure. A lot of what we've been talking about to date has been what we're doing with the store. But I can find out and then I'll get back to you.
Yeah, no, just that I know that there are people that go there year after year, so it would be good if we could get that information. Thank you.
Great. Any further questions on that one? Seeing none, we have no in-camera issues tonight, so we can move on to priority issue 8A, municipal taxes. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thank you. I put this on to open a discussion with my colleagues. We all know that through staff's good work and our due diligence, this year we passed a budget that had zero tax increase, which was great. We're in a very not a bad financial position thanks to this council and councils before through our financial sustainability plan. So, but I've noticed, I mean, what happened was the assessment and on an average of $165,000 assessment went up by 0.9%. So if you had a $165,000 house, you're paying $14 more, which is very modest. And I wanted to bring this up because I think that there might be an opportunity for us to help people out in a modest way, at the least. I think that there's two ways that people pay for services in this town, and one is taxes, and the other is on the utility side. And I just want to. I've talked to the treasurer over the past week, and I don't know if there's an opportunity, but I think that at this time, and I know we're going to be talking about recovery plans and that sort of thing, but right now, people are hurting. I know that the upper levels of government are doing their utmost in a gargantuan way to try to mitigate the effects of this. But I thought that maybe it's up for a discussion for us to talk about how we could do our part, and even if it's in a small way, to help the taxpayers of this town. And even if it's a very modest amount at the minimum, it would mean something, even if it's symbolic. So I'm going to open that up for discussion. I know that Janet, has it could be problematic, but we've been very diligent in terms of making sure that we're ready for the future for a rainy day, per se. I think it's raining out. It's raining very hard. So if there's anything we can do, I would. I don't want to have a decision tonight, but I would like to have maybe staff look at different ways that we can mitigate in the short term, at least, the financial impacts that people are feeling, because I know they're feeling it. So I'm going to open it up at that. And I know that we have a neighbor who had a modest increase that has rescinded that. We didn't have any increase. And what the increase was on an average was because of assessment. So I just thought I'd open that up, and I'd like to hear what everybody thinks. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Dwyer, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm supportive of the idea of receiving a staff report about some sort of financial relief. And I'm curious to see what Sean's priority item coming forward tonight is about the recovery plan, because I mean, I wasn't thinking directly about property owners, although I don't disagree that it would be nice to look at financial options for relief across the municipality. I was thinking more about small businesses. But I mean, I'll be honest, I haven't been following terribly closely the financial recovery programs that have been coming out from the province and the feds, and where those missing pieces are. So I'd like to see a comprehensive report from staff if it's possible. And maybe that's more of a question for Malcolm than anybody else about, whether or not there is an opportunity for the municipality to provide some sort of financial relief to property owners without falling into, I don't know, some sort of legal quandary of giving taxpayer money back to certain sources. I don't know. But I'd be very interested to see a report with some options coming forward, both for individual property owners and then to just residents. Because I mean, the thing is, this type of financial relief, if it's going to be a tax rebate, is only going to affect property owners directly. It's not going to capture the portion of the population that rents housing. That's all.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. Any other questions, comments on this one? Mayor Panko?
Yeah, my comments are similar to Nikki's here. I mean, those who are most impacted, maybe people who are tenants and may not get any relief if we do make a reduction in taxes in some capacity. I agree with Jay. A lot of our residents are really feeling the impact, and I think we all are compassionate and understanding. It's a matter of what the best mechanism would be to help and whom should we help. And I think my preference is we look where the greatest needs are, and we will discuss a little bit further with regards to small business, because that is a deep concern. But I think some other municipalities have taken some steps to provide some degree of relief, and so I'll be interested in staff preparing some insights into what possibilities may exist, and then the impact. Because if we're drawing from reserves, it's a matter of it has a long-term impact. But as Jay says, we've had some money set aside for a rainy day, and well, it's sunny today. We know it is raining out there, unfortunately, in many ways. So yeah, I support the request.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna.
Thanks, Councillor Brand, for raising that. Would have been great to have a bit of a heads up so I get my head around this. I think council in the last few months has been through the suspension of the interest rates and some of the parking. Those are small gestures, but they were costing I think $25,000 a month or something in. So it's not a small gesture. So we have been doing that. If you do have some ideas, Councillor Brown, I'd be nice to jot those down as a bit of a discussion paper. We can think about it. I have been following some of the municipalities, particularly the impact on municipalities. One of the things that I'm learning is, like we all are, that we're in the midst of this, and to make either rash or I don't have any data yet that people are unable to pay their taxes because of the COVID crisis. I don't have any sense that what the impact is on that. Certainly people who have been suspended from work are going to have a difficult time and have to juggle their budget, but I don't know how many people are either not paying or late in paying their taxes as compared to any other year. So staff could provide us that going forward. The other thing I understand is that municipalities will not be able, if in going forward, because we cannot carry a debt or deficit, that we can carry debt, we can't have a deficit in our budgets, that we do rely on the upper tier, both provincial and federal government. Municipalities across the country are turning to those upper tiers to say, you're going to have to help us here, because I think Councillor Brennan's on the right track. There's no way that we could increase taxes going forward, but I'm not in a position with the information I have so far to think about further reductions. It's not that I'm not sensitive to it, but I think it's a good discussion to start. And I think it's something we should do going forward, for maybe not at every meeting, but I don't have any problem carrying on the conversation on this important matter.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Councillor Alford.
Yeah, I think we're all probably fully in favor of doing what we can for all of our constituents. And again, basically thinking out loud right now, but I would also want to look at, I'm not adverse to getting a staff report, but I have paid quite a bit of attention to what's coming down from the feds in the province. And I don't know what there is left to throw money at. They've done, as Councillor Brennan used the word, I think, gargantuan effort to funnel money down. So I would like more information about where we think the gaps are, how that would be administered, what segment of our population, and then later on, depending on how this goes, I would be very careful about anything like that, because I feel our responsibility is to guard the long-term health, financial health of the municipality. So I'm sort of torn here, and would definitely want to hear more information before I could have before I feel we can have a fulsome discussion about it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Alford. We'll go back to Councillor Dwyer.
Yeah, sorry, just to go back to my initial question, which was directed at CAO Morris, do we have a sense whether or not we're even legally permitted to use municipal funds for something of this nature? I mean, there are certainly restrictions about what sort of money you could give out as a donation to certain property owners, but is this just considered a community donation and is permitted as such, or do we have a sense of whether or not we're talking about something that's just not possible?
Yeah, so through the chair, I think what some communities have done in terms of business supports is they've structured it to go through their CIP program. So we know that's an avenue to dispense public money. So we're looking at that presently as an avenue, but I think I like what I'm hearing around the table about let's define where the need is, where are the pressure points first, and then structure something to address those pressure points. So, for instance, Jennifer mentioned earlier in her report that she's launched a business survey. So that's going to give us, we hope, tremendous insight into where the friction points are within the business community. So that's going to lend some insight for sure. But yeah, I mean, we have to be careful about bonusing, so to speak, individual businesses, but as long as we do it through an approved platform, I think we'll be on solid ground. But we need to identify the audience first. So as Councillor Brennan had indicated, if it's a tax rate or a reduction in taxes, that applies to everybody, and that's well within your right to do that. There are some complexities if you want to choose a certain tax classification to provide relief to. Typically, we do all classes. So when you set the budget, it applies to all classes. For instance, if the target were residential taxpayers and you wanted to reduce that class, it has a domino effect on all the other classes. So we could provide advice from staff in terms of what the implications of making that decision would be on the other classifications. Without getting too deep into taxation issues, we do have capping on certain classifications, industrial, commercial. We're at the cap right now, so we have to be careful. We don't have a lot of latitude in terms of changing the rates for those classifications. But once council provides direction on where you think the relief is needed, we can provide advice on how to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Oh, you're muted, I think, Jay.
Sorry. I appreciate everyone's comments, and I'm glad that we're talking about this right now for sure. I mean, and I think that a recovery plan is going to be important going forward. But what I was trying to put out was right now that people are strapped, and you know, as I said before, the assessment is 0.9%. So as we said, when we pass the budget, we've got a very modest average increase, probably $14 on a $165,000 assessment. There's a, that's probably, that assessment's probably low, I would hope, given the real estate market in the last little while. So, if it could be a little more than that. So if it's, if it's $40 a household or whatever, that's a starting point. But I was just trying to, it's a gesture to the taxpayers that we understand, and I think that we have the room to do it. And I mean, I'm sort of surprised and astounded that we have $25,000 a month in late fees. I didn't know that was happening, and that's astounding to me. But and on the other point too about the upper tier, I think FCM put in a request into the government for some massive amount. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Malcolm, but $8 to $10 billion for, and then the request was on per capita. I think we talked about it's over $1.8 million or something for Smith Falls, and that with that request. So the help infrastructure wise, I think, is coming from the upper tier. But regardless of that, I'm glad we're having this conversation. And and thank you, Janet, for talking to me this week. I know you told me the complexities of trying to do something which I thought was fairly simple, or could be simple. But I look forward to talking about this in the days to come. It's not like we have to do this tonight, but as long as everybody agrees that we're going to be talking about it in the days to come, that's great. And I think that people in town will appreciate our efforts on their behalf.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Councillor McKenna.
Yeah, it is an important discussion. I think Councillor Dwyer talked about, I know Councillor Brennan's referred to the taxpayers. I'd like to think of the residents, all of them, including the people who are renting and the children who aren't paying taxes, and all, 9,000 people. And how do we not just talk about taxpayers? They're important, they pay the bills, but it's all 9,000. So whatever we do, I certainly want to think about the scope of ensuring that those most in need will benefit the most. So I too, Councillor Brennan, want to keep this discussion going. I look forward to hearing back from staff, and I'll get my thinking cap on and bring it to the next opportunity we have.
Right, so I'm hearing a consensus for a report from staff at our next meeting on the 19th. Councillor Alford.
Thank you. Yes, and that just twigged me that we do have a large segment. I felt like a patriot paying my bills every month for the last 2 months, because I know a lot of people are hurting, and if I or others like me are staying on top of theirs, then that's part of how we contribute to the overall health of our community, our province, and our country. So yes, I would be very there are a lot of people in our town that are hurting, and then there are a lot of people who are not, who are financially stable, who have the wherewithal to get through this much easier than some others. So that would be a big, to echo Councillor McKenna, that would be a big concern of mine, that it goes to those people who are really needing it. I do not really need it. I doubt very many at the table do, but that would be my overarching concern. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Alford. So we'll, CAO Morris, can we get a report from staff for the meeting on the 19th on the needs in the community and how the town can best help small business and residents?
Yes, we'll bring forward a discussion paper with options.
Great, thank you. Councillor Brennan, are we good?
Thank you, everybody. That's good. Yep.
Thank you for bringing this up tonight. So we'll move on to 8B, lifting apart lot control. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just can you hear me?
You're great.
Excellent. So this is I'll be very quick with this report. It's pretty similar to several others we've seen in the last over the last couple of months. I'm just bringing forward another part law control application for Block 10 on the Bellamy Farm subdivision. So if we pass this bylaw, that would have the effect of creating 6 separate townhouse lots. So I'll leave it there and ask if council has any questions on this.
Councillor Dwyer.
I have no questions on this. To me, this is an administrative matter more than anything else, but I'm wondering whether or not staff could bring forward a delegated authority report for part lot, because this is the first time that we've really done part lots, and we're going to be flooded with them because now almost all we're doing is semis in towns. So if I don't know if there's opportunity to briefly give a green light to that tonight, but maybe it's something that staff could bring back in the next couple of weeks.
I think that's a great point. Councillor Dwyer, any other questions, comments on it? Councillor Alfred?
No, just that this is what we've done for blocks 6, 7, 8, and 9. So this just seems a natural progression to go ahead with this.
Great. All right. So we will proceed with Carl's recommendation. No further questions.
Wait, I have one.
Oh, sorry, Lorraine. Councillor Allen? Or Nadine, sorry.
Sorry about that, Chris, or Councillor Dwyer or McGuire. I just wanted to confirm the action there. I know that our council supported of Planner Grandkey's report, but Councillor Dwyer also mentioned delegated authority. I just want to confirm if you are giving that tonight or if you want it to brought back.
Do we have any other comments on that, whether we want to report or CO Morris?
Yeah, so there may be a couple of ways to streamline these routine type of approvals. One is through a consent agenda that we'll be bringing forward in the procedural bylaw update. So that's one mechanism. The other is, of course, delegated authority. That requires a bylaw. So if there's a comfort level in streamlining these types of approvals, we'll come back with options and a recommendation.
Okay, great. So we'll move forward with the staff recommendation, and then we'll also get a report on how to make this process more efficient in the future. All right. Thank you, Carl, for moving all these forward. Great work. We'll go to now 8C with the draft tree canopy report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to bring forward for Council's consideration a draft tree canopy preservation and enhancement policy. So as Council will recall, the Municipal Act was amended to require municipalities to create these. While there's not a lot of provincial directive as to what was supposed to go into them or what they were supposed to look like, the predominant objective was to create a climate mitigation framework. Shortly before this was to become mandatory, and actually a couple of days before I presented my first report on this, word trickled down from the province that these requirements would no longer be enforced. Nonetheless, staff and council agreed that this is something we should still be doing and it's important to the town. And we have a fair bit of leeway in terms of what we want to do. So the proposed policy is also intended to fulfill the priority identified in their strategic plan of enhancing the urban forest. So the framework presented tonight follows what council supported last time and reflects that council was not looking for a restrictive or regulatory approach such as a tree cutting bylaw, and instead we'd like to focus on municipal leadership, education, and connections with the programs that are already out there. So at this time we're seeking council's concurrence with the policy approach presented and direction to either finalize the policy or tweak it as may be necessary. So I'll quickly go through a few of the key points here. So the first 3 sections set the stage for what it is we're trying to do and why we're doing it, outlining the economic, community, and environmental benefits of the urban forest, and also it's an asset to the community. Section 4 outlines best practices that are intended to be a guide to town staff and members of the public. So emphasizing the importance of native tree selection and also picking the right tree for the right space. Ultimately, the goal, of course, is a tree that survives and thrives over the long term. Different species are more suited to different sorts of conditions. These sections link to schedules that contain the more detailed technical information. The appendices, of course, can be pulled and handed out to residents, and I would imagine we'd want to have them graphically improved for public distribution first. RVCA staff have been consulted extensively on the process, and assuming council's blessing on the approach, we'll work with them to expand on advice for conifer planting, bare root seedling planting, and shoreline planting. They've been very helpful in through this. Section 5 emphasizes the municipal leadership role in this process. So the policy takes some of the points from our 2014 tree care policy and expands it beyond road allowances. Section 5.1 emphasizes at a very high level the importance of interdepartmental collaboration when looking at public and private sector projects that affect or relate to the tree canopy. So we recognize that several different departments, especially public works, community services, and planning, all have an operational stake in this at various points of projects. Section 5.2 suggests best practices for applications under the Planning Act, so namely subdivision and site plan applications, where we really have an opportunity to work with developers to incorporate green spaces and trees into developments. The official plan establishes broad goals in terms of what we look for in development, and this section is intended to assist with implementing those goals by providing some detailed and achievable measures that developers can do to enhance their tree canopies. The best practices, of course, may not all be applicable in all circumstances, so this is intended to be read with a lot of flexibility. But by implementing the section, we're putting some weight and outlining more specific guidance in terms of what council is looking for in a development approval. And we hope this facilitates landscaping discussions through a planning process. Section 5.5 speaks to municipal operations on our roadsides and in parks and highlights that trees should only be removed where necessary and replaced on a 2-for-1 ratio. The policy also introduces the concept of a weak tree canopy area. And these are parts of the town that are especially bereft of trees, for which the policy proposes replanting at a 3-to-1 ratio. And what we need to determine is how we're going to identify the weak tree canopy area. This section also outlines some communication measures that we can undertake to encourage nearby residents to be part of the solution in keeping street trees alive and vigorous. Section 6 highlights the need to identify and develop partnerships. So we recognize that some other agencies and organizations can help us fulfill our goal, and they're better resourced and have in-house expertise on this. The main one, of course, is the Conservation Authority. However, we've also been in touch on a high level with REAL, and there will likely be others. Schedule C to the policy outlines a number of program ideas that we can explore on our own or in partnership with others. So it's not intended to be a static list, but rather an evolving listing to spark discussion in the town and in the community. Section 7 is the implementation strategy that provides direction on actions to help bring us to our goal. The first is the assessment that would help us simply create a baseline indication of a tree canopy. We look to work with the RVCA and expect a good portion of that to be done at the staff level. But that would at least give us the indication of where we're at. So this would also help be implemented through a detailed inventory, which is certainly a nice to have that we can look at. Well, just pardon me a second. We do not have grapes. I'm sorry.
I have grapes.
Oh, no, unfortunately, I'm sorry, Kaisa.
You should get some grapes, Carl.
Mm-hmm. But we're also looking at, in terms of implementation, a promotion program would be an essential part of of what we're looking to do. So to publicize the policy. We'd also be looking for consideration of an advisory committee that can be and that could be bundled into a future climate change committee if council wishes to do that, and of course a monitoring program that's going to outline what we're looking to do over the long term and how well we're doing it. So planning staff have consulted in detail with other municipal departments and RVCA in the preparation for this draft, and we've assessed best practices from some other municipalities. We have not undertaken broad public consultation on this draft as we felt it was important for council to consider the policies first. and to confirm to staff that the broad approach is what you're looking for. So we are looking for direction on a couple of points. One is the location of subdivision trees, and so current municipal practice requires trees associated with a subdivision application to be placed on a private property, whereas historically they were planted on rights of way. So private trees require no municipal maintenance. However, they'd also wouldn't be protected by the town, and that may impede the fulfillment of the policy's objectives. So we'll look for council's direction on this, of course, where space is available. Tree replacement is another thing. We are proposing a 2-for-1 replacement ratio in the policy right now, except street trees and weak tree canopy areas where we're looking for 3 trees in that area, and if not that area, elsewhere in town. So we seek council's direction, concurrence with this ratio. And weak tree canopy areas, of course, is something that we'd be looking for welcome your direction as we move forward on how they should be identified and where. And if we'd even look at identifying entire neighborhoods of private property and target those areas for planning incentives, for instance. And then, of course, the implementation strategy. I'm interested in council's thoughts on what's outlined there. So the measures for obtaining baseline data through an assessment, promoting the objectives of the policy, and establishing a technical advisory committee. So the inventory it's a nice to have. Well, it would be helpful. It would require, of course, a larger financial commitment and implemented as a longer term thing, not something we'd be looking at doing right away. But that would inform more detailed management decisions and priorities. So that's something that in time we'll look for council's direction on whether we want to get into that. But at this point, we have a draft policy, and we're looking for council's direction as to whether this approach meets your intent, and also the next steps. If you want to undertake a virtual public consultation to further investigate any points, or how you wanted to proceed on that. So I'll pause there and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Carl. I think anybody who's had a chance to look at the report knows how big of a project this is, and I think the trees are probably our most undervalued asset in town. So thank you for putting it together for us. We're going to start with Councillor Allen and then go to Alfred and Dwyer.
Yes, thank you, Carl. I read these with great interest, and I read them several times because I think job well done. This is something that we've talked about for a number of years, and then that I've been in councillor. And we have lived through some time, the ice storm. I'm on Maple Avenue, and Maple Avenue trees most of them were taken down after the ice storm because of damage. And then the town planted trees and promoted them, and they're growing beautifully now. I have a few questions. One of them was, in terms of canopy, I hear over and over, especially from young parents, the lack of shade trees in many of our parks. Not just at Lower Reach, but in the other parks that people take their children to play in. So I think that should be a priority for sure. The other thing is, in your reports, you talk about the arborist. Do we have an arborist on staff?
We do not.
We did have, though, didn't we, at one time? A young woman. And to me, she was a great asset because I know she brought forward a lot of good advice. The other thing is, I have mixed feelings about where we plant the trees in terms of the subdivision. I walked along Cataraqui Trail the other day where Parkview's housing development is, and that area is so wooded along the trail, but when you look towards where people will be living, it's very barren. So it's interesting, one of the questions I would have is it going to be a shared expense? Will the developer help create the trees in the development that they're creating? Or is it going to be something that we do as a municipality? Sorry, I made a lot of comments. I just, first off, I wanted to say, this is something I think we need, and I really appreciate it. So did you want to answer, Carl?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Allen, thank you for the question. When we're looking at tree planting through a planning approval, a subdivision, or a site plan approval, it would normally be the developer who would be providing the tree. And then if the tree is eventually planted, depending on where the tree goes, if it goes on municipal property, then it becomes something we end up having the responsibility to maintain. And if it's on private property, then it's theirs.
All right, is that everything, Councillor Allen?
Yeah, no, I'm in support of adopting the tree policy for sure. Thank you.
Great questions. Thank you, Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo Lorraine's excitement of having this draft policy. Or this draft. I think there's a great deal of content in there, and a couple of things that you mentioned, Carl, when you were speaking, is whether it should be a private or a public expense, and I think it should be both. All these subdivisions, the new ones, should require the developer to plant, but there's nothing to say that we can't plant as well on the right-of-ways or the sidewalks, the streets themselves where it's municipal property. So I would encourage that. I know we have a budget, I think it's about 20,000 a year for trees in the town's budget. And then I do think that, and I think you've already done this, that developers are required to in their properties, their developments, to plant trees, native trees. There was one thing that I didn't necessarily jump out at me, but has been somewhat concerning to me as being on the Planning Advisory Committee, is we don't have any site alteration bylaws. And so when these developments start, there is no mechanism by which the municipality can save some of the trees, and some of the developments have just cut down more than I think might have been necessary. And so I would like to see if we can't address that somewhere in this tree policy as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alford. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Alford's point about, sorry, Wendy, what was your last point? Whatever it was a good one. I echo that. But Carl, you asked for some specific pieces back. The first one was about where in the municipality there is a weak tree canopy. I think that's the component that should really go out to public consultation, because I think getting a broad sense from the community about where we're missing things will help us shine a light on how to make improvements. I did have a question before I answer your question about what level of public consultation this should have. Can you clarify for me if there is any real impact on private property owners in this policy, aside from those that are already governed by subdivision agreements or site plan?
Through the chair, the draft policy at this point is not proposing any shalls on private property owners above what you'd referenced in terms of existing planning.
So that's fine. I'd rather keep the public consultation then, less to the policy component, which at the end of the day really doesn't impact private property owners, and instead ask them for feedback on identifying areas of improvement within the community, acknowledging within that what we're talking about today is mostly about publicly owned trees. We are not broaching into the subject of private canopy, which I think is maybe step 2. I don't think we're ready for that yet. I'd love us to be ready for that, but I don't think that the community is ready to absorb that type of change. As far as a 3-to-1 ratio goes, which was one of your other questions, I have no problem with that. That's par for the course. Planting on public lands. So here's my planner hat on. Particularly when we get to subdivisions, and when we have shifted our mix of development from primarily single detached dwellings to townhomes, some of which we have narrowed the frontage down to 4.5 meters, you don't have room in that to maintain sufficient distance to put a tree on anybody's front lawn. So I think we have to be mindful that the policy should look at incorporating clusters of trees. So the developer shall plant X number of trees per lot, but not necessarily on everyone's front yard. So whether or not it's in the rear yard where there's no services or utilities, or if it's clustering them around corner lots where you don't have the trenching for services, I think we want to maintain flexibility therein. The other thing I'm sensitive to is that when a developer offloads a house to a purchaser, the cost of that tree is directly related to the price point of the house, to a lot of points that the developer actually goes out and solicits from the purchaser what type of tree they want on their property. So to say at the end of the day that we expect those trees to be planted on public land, even though the private property owner is directly paying for it, I think we want to be sensitive to that. The only other thing that I wanted to note, particularly when it came to identifying the weak canopy, there's a fantastic resource. It's called iNaturalist, and it's an app. And what you do on iNaturalist is take photographs and archive species of all sorts of flora and fauna, and it even includes insects and things like that. And actually, if you go on, there's a fairly decent database, particularly of tree canopy already identified in Smiths Falls. So using something like that as an interactive public engagement tool to get people involved in identifying where species at risk might be, where diseased trees might be, where there are no trees, and that's where your weakness is, might be something that we want to do. And it might even be a fantastic partnership to launch with like a high school biology class to get them to go out and do some field ecology, because I know there's curriculum for that, but it's not something that, you know, kids get super excited about because they're in the classroom and it's a desktop exercise. So using something like that might be advantageous to us and our inventory, which is going to be hugely, it's going to be a massive undertaking for staff, but also engage the community and get their participation in this. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor McKenna?
Thank you, Mr. Grinke. Is a good report. And on the, yes, the public consultation. If we can find a way to do that, I'm in favor, absolutely. There is a couple of specific comments. We talk about using native species and stay away from invasive species or weak trees. And then there's several points in the policy that said plant native species wherever possible. If you can plant a tree, shouldn't we say it has to be a native species rather than unless we can't find them? I didn't understand the wherever possible. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellent question. There are certain circumstances from the research that I did where a non-native tree that is not necessarily an invasive tree, so it's not going to spread aggressively on its own, may be better suited to certain urban circumstances, especially when we're in the downtown area or other constrained areas where we're really limited in the amount of trees or the variety of trees that we can plant. I'm sort of opening the door to consideration of non-native trees that don't spread. So not the Norway maples, for instance, that ideally at the end of the day, we want a tree that's a non-native tree that survives is better than a native tree that doesn't. So that's why I was sort of gave that little bit of wiggle room in the policy, while acknowledging that wherever possible, and especially in areas where there is more space or closer to a natural area, it's that much more important that we go with the native species.
That's good, thank you. If I may, Mr. Chair. And then there was a good section on the 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratios. We have a crude canopy estimate. I think our friends at the Conservation Authority suggested we might have 20% and the goal is 30. So I would, rather than wait for perfect, that's good enough. It's probably around 20 and we want to get to 30. To do that though, I wonder, I don't know how long that's going to take us at the rate we would go. And so I wondered about 3-to-1 and 4-to-1, increasing that ratio, because the 30% I understand from Trees Canada and Environment Canada is the minimum recommendation. So with the other, I don't know, and we'll know. I'm not going to wait for perfect. Let's get going on it, and we'll keep improving this policy as we go forward and improving our targets. But for now, I wonder if we shouldn't be a little more ambitious and stretch beyond the minimum. And maybe I'm fine with saying 30%, but it'd probably take us decades to get there at a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1. I just wonder about increasing those ratios. And then my final, that's an open question. And finally, did we think about edible trees at all? They're not on the list anywhere. Urban orchards or fruit trees are not mentioned anywhere. And I know other municipalities are considering that as an option. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McKenna. Carl, did you have any comments on that, or we move on?
Well, certainly, I appreciate the excellent comments, and definitely, I'd welcome council's direction on the appropriate ratios. Unfortunately, to achieve any major gain in percentages, it's going to be a long-term investment. The best tree planted is one from planted 50 years ago, and I don't see why we need to necessarily be bound by 30. Higher has many advantages, and I guess the biggest constraint would be budget. As far as looking at the baseline, my understanding of our VCAs, they've done some excellent work on the sub-watershed basis. It's not just, their assessment isn't just limited to within the geographic boundaries of the town of Smith Falls. It includes the town and some of the rural areas around the town. So that's and some conservation authorities have been able to define based on the exact municipal boundaries, and they have staff who can assist with some mapping interpretation as well. So certainly we should be able to have that investigation, but certainly if council would like to accept the 20% as we have now as a basis, and then aim for 30% or a higher number, I can accommodate the report accordingly.
All right, thank you, Carl. We have Mayor Panko up next, and then Councillor Dwyer again.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor McKenna from the number standpoint. Excuse me. I don't think we can have too many trees. And as you mentioned, the best trees we have are trees that were planted 40, 50 years ago. And if we can find a method of really make an aggressive approach and planting a lot of trees in the next decade, that's going to make a much bigger impact than spreading this out over the decades to come. A couple thoughts on a subdivision. I see some merit in planting in the right of way in the boulevard. I guess if you look at the benefit, may not be that evident today, but it would be strongly evident decades from now. And I think we've all been places, and even in our own community, where you have beautiful tree-lined boulevards. And if we're going to, I guess, create that for the future and ensure that the trees are consistent in species and size, as well as to ensure that they're preserved. And if a tree dies on our boulevard, we have the autonomy, the ability to go and replace it. If a tree dies on someone's front lawn, we have no ability to go in there. So I would see some merit in us. It means more cost and more maintenance, but it does create a better security of future for trees. I support a forest advisory committee. I think that's could be an extension of a climate change committee. I think maybe as you referenced, I think it makes a lot of sense to have our public engaged. When it comes to our subdivisions, I would love to see stronger policy for the preservation of existing trees, especially trees over a certain diameter. As we all know, it takes so long for a tree to grow. We need to ensure we preserve all we have. And we do have a lot of green space in our community that could be leveraged and could be filled with trees, but certainly a lot of opportunity for additional planting. And then I think that this is just, I think, Carl, good work on this report. I know it was extensive. I know it was a lot of effort, but this is a great example of a governance policy that will benefit our community for well over a century. And the work that we do and the policy we bring in that will help shape the future views of our community and the tree cover will go a long way towards helping our future residents. And when it comes to public consultation, I'd like to see us do what we can virtually and seek feedback. And I also would like to see within the consultation at least is that we ask the public for feedback on preservation of trees on existing private property. And I think for the most part, the vast majority, if not all of our residents would be supportive of wanting to keep trees on their property and wanting to maintain them, not wanting to see them cut down. But I think it wouldn't hurt for us to ask those questions when we're seeking public feedback. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Penko. Councillor Dwyer, or CO Morris, you had a comment there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe others are in front of me.
Okay, wasn't related to the last one. So we'll go to Councillor Dwyer next.
Thanks. Sorry, I guess I thought this kind of went without saying, but I assume that all of our tree planting efforts would be budget dependent anyways. So as much as it's lovely to be able to set the goal of 20% coverage at a 3-to-1 ratio and hit that as quickly as possible, I mean it's only going to make a difference if we actually put the money in the budget. The other thing I wanted clarity on, Carl, when you say 20% coverage, are you talking about a tree canopy across the entire geographic area of the town or just on municipally owned land?
Through the chair, the policy was proposing or envisioning across the entire geographic area of the municipality.
Okay, so I think we have to keep that lower because otherwise you're going to be concentrating all of our tree efforts onto very small areas. I mean, as much as we have a significant resource of municipal property, there is such thing as overcrowding of trees. I mean, we want them to thrive, right? And if we're set on this 20% mindset and we're clustering all of those trees on municipal property, I don't think we want to set that goal too high. So I'm comfortable with 20% as recommended. If we start to include private property in the policy, because it's really not there right now, but if we do, then I think that's the opportunity to revisit what we want our canopy coverage to look at, like across the entire municipality.
All right, thank you, Councillor Dwyer. CAO Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my comments picking up on Councillor Dwyer's, just to put it in perspective, a 60 to 90 millimeter caliber tree costs between $350 and $500. So with our current budget of 20,000, that's approximately 50 trees a year. So I just offer that as insight that if the more aggressive that you want to be, the more we need to commit to an appropriate budget. I'm delighted to hear there's support amongst some for a site alteration bylaw. We've talked about it internally as staff. I think they go hand in hand, because our efforts to plant 50 trees a year can be entirely eclipsed by one clear cutting of a lot. So I would encourage council to look at them in unison. I'm not saying we need to hold up this policy until we get a site alteration, but if that's the direction, we will turn our thoughts to a site alteration bylaw once this is in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna.
Just to go back to the costing, certainly if without the policy, we don't have any direction. So if we establish this policy, and we say this is really important to us, doesn't mean that the municipality has to pay for all these trees. There are grants and there are tree foundations, Trees Canada. There's lots of other places. So we aren't on the hook. We're saying, let's be aspirational. It means that we're getting behind our trees. We've got a policy in place, and then we can find the resources in a variety of ways besides the municipal tax fund.
All right, thank you, Councillor McKenna. So I guess the direction is to, we're accepting the report. We've got lots of great feedback tonight. We're going to look for more public consultation or a way to consult the public through the near future, and the policy will keep moving forward. I think one comment I had was just on the ratios of replacement. I'd like to see the diameter of the tree that's being replaced being considered when we're talking replacement, because if we're replacing a 100-year-old maple with a different species, even though it's a 2-to-1, it might not result in equivalent canopy. So I'd like to see some kind of extra information go into just what the expected diameter of those replacement trees are going to be, so we have a fairly good like-for-like replacement. Edible stuff is great. I'd love to see a food forest in Smith Falls, so thanks, Councillor McKenna, for that one. Those are my comments, and I guess if nobody else is, everybody's had their say. All right, Carl, we're on to round 3.
Excellent. And thank you to council for the excellent discussion. I took lots of notes here, and we will get started on doing some virtual consultation. But I appreciate the feedback and the material to work with. So my third report is a response to a COVID-related planning issue that's come up. So over the last couple of weeks, town staff have fielded a couple of inquiries from residents who wish to place recreational vehicles on their property to accommodate someone who wishes to or needs to self-isolate from their household to minimize the potential spread of the COVID. This is often related to healthcare workers. Our zoning bylaw prohibits the parking of a recreational vehicle in a front yard or exterior side yard for more than 72 hours in a calendar month, and for RVs stored elsewhere in a lot, the bylaw doesn't allow them to be lived in for longer than 30 consecutive days. So the zoning provision is pretty normal. However, the rule has bumped into a circumstance that's of course completely unprecedented and not normal, with requests coming in from people who are doing the right thing for their household and the community as a whole. They're doing this to try to avoid and mitigate the spread. So as such, staff are proposing that council directs or staff to pause enforcement of this particular zoning section until 2 weeks after the municipal state of emergency is lifted, provided that some locational and safety parameters are followed, which we'd like to convey to which we would convey to anyone who asks. The 2-meter property line setback is proposed for council's consideration. However, we're not set on that number. We recognize it really constrains the placement of RVs on a lot of properties in denser neighborhoods, especially where driveways are close to the lot lines. So the number is proposed to be reflective of social distancing requirements, especially where we look at windows opening up along lot lines, as we do not want to create discomfort from abutting property owners. So we can consider so council, or we can look at 1 meter and instead of 2. It's either way, of course, it's essential that the RVs be situated entirely on the property. So we recognize that by and large, these temporary accommodations would likely be used for essential workers and their families. However, we're not recommending that the pause in enforcement is explicitly exclusive to a particular employment category. Firstly, that creates a new administrative burden on staff, potentially accompanied by an appeal process that adds time that people do not have. It also creates an uncomfortable situation where we're subjectively evaluating the validity of an individual request. The reality is we expect there's going to be a wide variety of reasons why people may wish to self-isolate in an RV, and the safety and compatibility considerations in the community are the same. So it's tough to find an ideal solution to this issue. On the one hand, zoning rules are in place for a reason, and consistently applying them gives everyone confidence in our system. On the other hand, we're dealing with an incredibly unprecedented situation, and one that's ultimately temporary. Of course, we don't know how temporary it can be, but staff feel that given the circumstances, the proposed approach is fairest in order to allow people to do the right thing to avoid the spread while protecting safety and compatibility as best we can. So I need to emphasize, we're not proposing an amendment to the zoning, or we're not looking to approve specific locations, rather simply proposing that that bylaw services staff be authorized to pause enforcement of these particular two sections of the zoning bylaw. So on conclusion of the municipal state of emergency, property owners would be expected to restore their properties to compliance with a 2-week period, or at least that's we're proposing, a 2-week period before enforcement starts again. So any other bylaws in effect, property standards, noise, those we're not proposing any pause on that. So that probably means that generators would likely be out. So it's certainly considered a time sensitive matter as we are in the state, and certainly these inquiries and requests are coming in. So we welcome council's feedback on this so that we can provide direction to a number of residents who have requested. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Carl. We'll start off with Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for this, Carl. I think all of us are supportive of finding strategies to protect families who need to isolate, or particularly healthcare workers or those on the front lines. I did have a couple of questions though. So this would normally be complaint driven, and I'm thinking of this 2 meters away from the next house. How will we deal with the neighbor who can't stand the sound of the air conditioner from an RV so close to their house? We encountered some of these comments from neighbors of the RVs in Victoria Park. So that's what made me think of this. And the other second question, you can answer both at once. It would have to be very clear that the waste, as you say, one of the provisions is the waste can't be disposed of in the town sewers. And yet, is there some agreement that the owner of this RV understands that they'll be responsible for pump out and find someone to do that for them? I want to do this, but I don't want to make more problems down the road, because we really don't know how long this emergency is going to last. So I'm look forward to your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Alford. Excellent question, especially with respect to the air conditioner, and that unfortunately that is certainly one of the trade-offs on looking at this. There's no perfect solution here, and definitely we're not through this pause, we're not suggesting or authorizing anybody to be relieved from the noise bylaw provisions. I'm not sure if an RV air conditioner is going to bump into those sorts of requirements. The 2 meters from the lot line is not nearly enough to mitigate that sound, but that's certainly that's a good that's one of the things that we need to balance in looking at a request like this. There's no perfect solution. So in terms of the sewage pump out, I have discussed with Director Dunlop, and we don't actually have a bylaw in place that specifically prevents this sort of activity from happening. So what the recommendation as it stands would involve us simply advising folks not to do that. If there's some stronger action that council would like us to take in that, then certainly I can take that back to staff, and we can work with Public Works on that if we need to make it a little bit stronger, that we don't want to see those we don't want to see the sewage connected to the dwelling.
All right, thank you, Carl. Next up, we have Councillor Brennan.
Thanks, Carl. I have no problem with this at all. I think that it's the least we could do, and I'm not really worried about if there's a nurse that lives next door to me and she wants to keep her family safe. I'd be more than happy to have that happen. I guess my question would be, do we know of other municipalities that have done the same thing?
So that's not, unfortunately, I did not spend a lot of time investigating what our neighbors have done. I know, I know Montague Township has followed a similar approach, but certainly this came up fairly quickly, and we're looking to move, I guess, obtain council's feedback on.
Irregardless, it's the right thing to do. Thanks, Carl.
All right, so I'm seeing a consensus to go forward with the recommendation. Excellent. All right, great work on moving quickly on this one, Carl. I think that's the end of your reports tonight. So thank you for joining us, and we'll probably see you on the 19th.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to 8E, Water Pollution Control Plant Performance Report. Mr. Barlow.
Thank you, Chairperson McGuire, members of council. Tonight, I'm bringing this report forward to give you guys some information on the operations of the wastewater treatment plant or Water Pollution Control Center for the year of 2019 from January 1st to December 31st. The report's prepared by our compliance coordinator, Sarah Cook, in accordance with our environmental compliance approval. And we are required to have this performance report completed and to the ministry prior to March 31st every year. So we had it completed on time, and it was prepared and given to the ministry. And with everything going on, we decided to delay a bit and bring it forward to council. And you now have it in front of you, and I will turn it over to any questions.
Great, thank you. Councillor Alford?
Just a couple things. I noticed that the SCADA communications is there some more reliable technology for losing connection as often as we have?
That was at the Center Street pump station, and that's Jason Douglas. That's more of a public works issue, but I was informed that it was actually the Bell lines, and it's the communication through those lines. So we are going to look in the future at alternative forms of communication, so we're not dependent on the Bell structure.
Okay, thank you. And just good job on finding a coagulant that could take the place of the very expensive stuff we were going to have to do. So that test went well, and it's continuing. We're continuing to use that, Jason?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we're running at like a 50% dosage from the previous chemical. So within the budget, we should be able to right now stay within budget.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thanks for finding that. That's all. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions, comments? Councillor McKenna?
Thank you for the report. And people have, like you folks, or many of you have been around the municipal world a lot longer than me. I continue to be impressed by the complexity of a modest town like Smith Falls, the size, the amount of requirements and reporting that we have to do. I know, and the tree policy reminded me of the impact on other bylaws and on the official plan, and keeping tabs of the ripple effect of all of these. Every time you change something in the reporting requirements, CO Morse, was there one fact that we were looking at a piece of software that would assist you and staff and perhaps even council in keeping track of all of this and or am I mistaken?
Through the chair, so we have purchased asset management software that tracks all assets in the organization, including linear assets, roads, pipes. Yeah.
And if I may, does that include the reporting of them and the deadlines of when reports are due, like this critical report that we've received tonight?
Compliance requirements are the responsibility of each individual department. So Jason and his team have a pretty solid understanding of their timeframes. If that's something council wanted us to share with them, we could certainly make that available.
No, that's fine. I'm sure you're on top of it. It just, the complexity, I'm impressed by it. I appreciate the work of staff, and just I encourage the public to read that or to take a look at it. The amount of behind the scenes work that our employees to deliver clean water, to manage and treat waste, and the complexity and the red tape that we have to go through, important red tape. There is a cost to that, and I'd just like the public to understand as much as I do, and I'm continuing to learn just the valuable work. So I did read your report, appreciate it, and it was, and again, I go to the line that says the ministry didn't have any concerns with everything that we've done so far, and that our efforts to protect the environment, especially the Rita River, are first class. I watched what we're the effluent that leaves our facility is in very good shape, and I commend you and your team for doing that.
Thank you. I'll pass it along.
All right, thank you, Councillor McKenna. Any other comments? All right, so we can accept the report and look forward to another successful year at the Water Pollution Control Fund. Thank you, Jason. All right, so we've got 8F, contract extension for bulk course winter salt report. Director Dunlop.
Mr. Chair, my video doesn't seem to be loading. Can you hear my audio?
Yeah, you're loud and clear.
Okay, got a new laptop. I don't know why the video is not loading right now. The report that's before council tonight is essentially staffers seeking support to approve an optional one-year extension to our bulk course winter salt contract. Taking you back to June of last year, council passed a resolution to award a one-year contract to Cargill Salt, a division of Cargill Limited. And just wait here. Voila.
There we go.
Got it fixed. Again, back in June of last year, council passed resolution to award a one-year contract to Cargill Salt, their division of Cargill Limited. That was a joint procurement with the County of Lanark and 7 other participating municipalities. All in all, the whole group does a joint procurement of 18,100 metric tons of salt every year. So as a group, we have a tremendous amount of purchasing power. At the last contract, our low bid was $114.44 per metric ton, and that's based on an allocation of 1,000 metric tons used by the town each winter. Again, under the terms of that contract, ourselves and others within the group can do a procurement for, can extend the contract for 1 additional year. You'll see as an attachment to the report this evening that we received a letter from Cargill issued to the Lanark County Group. They are prepared to offer us an extension of the same services we currently enjoy at a delivered and reduced price. I should add at $105.87 per ton. All in all, that translates to a 7.5% discount in what we paid the previous winter. And just to take council back a little bit, the salt industry or the salt supply industry has faced a lot of challenges in the last couple of years. In 2018, there was a significant labor strike at the mine in Goderich, Ontario that had rippling effects in the industry. When you rolled into 2019, another major mining source in Cleveland, Ohio, under the Great Lakes flooded, and that added further pressures on the industry, and we're just finally coming out of that in 2020. We received word from the County of Lanark on April 27th that they have accepted to move forward with their contract. And I should point out that within our group, they account for 60% of the volumes in our cooperative. Looking at the report, council does have two options. We can accept or reject the pricing that has been presented by Cargill. Staff are currently recommending that we do accept the amended price and enjoy the 7.5% increase that goes with that. The Lanark County Road Superintendent Association, again, was the key group that puts together these joint tenders, sees a lot of value in the pricing that we're seeing presented this year. If we did proceed to award the contract extension to Cargill, you're looking at approximately an $8,500 savings. And I have to preface that with that would be if we used 1,000 tons of product over the full winter. So you're talking half of that technically could fall in 2020. The other half being in 2021 if we had a bad winter. So I'd like to certainly identify that savings, again, would only be seen if you were in a very tough winter where you're going to use that full allocation of product. So that's the presentation tonight, and thank you for the technical difficulties there. So
thank you, Troy. Any questions, comments? Looks good. Where does this 7.5% reduction put us back to where it was in 2018? Like, is the price back to normal now?
Good question, Mr. Chair. I'm just going back to the report last year. When we looked at our last pricing, we saw a 40% jump in salt with the last contract. So it went up 40%, only dropped 7.5%. So as a commodity, it's certainly increasing well above the rate of inflation. So our job locally is to do and use less and less of this material. And I think our move to use the treated sand and magnesium chloride is both saving us money and also moving us closer to an increased diet on our salt usage. So I don't think you'll ever see the prices get back to the $70 per ton that we saw several years ago.
All right, thank you, Troy. So I see consensus. We'll accept the report and the recommendation to move forward with the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we will move on to 8G, the Mayor's Task Force on Recovery. If I worded that or wrote it down right.
That's awesome. Yes, thank you, Councilor McGuire. I mean, we're all starkly aware of the impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had, not on just our residents, but certainly on our business community. And while we don't see business as usual anywhere, we see a number of businesses which have had to adapt and have done so, I think, extremely well. We look at our grocery stores, we look at places with curbside pickup, and they're doing what they can to manage through this crisis. A number of our businesses, of course, are completely shut down with no certainty as to when they'll be able to open, what conditions may be present, what restrictions may be they may have to live with we don't know whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. We don't know how long there will be an impact on business as usual, as we could have called it a couple of months ago. So a number of municipalities have launched a variety of recovery task forces, and when discussions we've had internally, that it's probably important that we do what we can to assist our businesses to adapt and recover. And there are obviously a number of federal programs and some provincial supports in place to try and help businesses get through the current crisis. But there is gaps in understanding. There may be breaks and linkages between the programs and the business people that are seeking it. We have some very creative and innovative local business owners who I'm confident are already planning how they can live in a changed world. Some of them we've been speaking with recently. So I think it's important that we take the opportunity to form a task force to ensure that we have the insights from our business community. And as CEO Morris mentioned earlier, there's already a survey out there which hit today, and feedback will be rolling in to ensure that our businesses have an opportunity, every opportunity possible to survive the current crisis, to adapt and to prepare for a new future. At the same time, understanding that we don't want empty storefronts, we don't want to see new businesses that have opened in the last 2 years, or any business for that matter, to not succeed. We think in many ways our businesses are, many of which are more, probably more at risk than some other businesses. We've seen a lot of business open in the last few years with growing and renewal of our economy. But those businesses are still pretty immature, have not had an opportunity to really entrench themselves and to be well capitalized. So I think we need to do what we can to preserve, enhance, and give every business an opportunity to survive. So I think we need to take that initiative.
All right, thank you, Mayor Panko. Do we have?
So in terms of reference, which is being developed, I've got a draft that we will be circulating to council probably tomorrow. We will try to put this together in the next few days with the intention of launching by the end of the week and bringing in stakeholders in the next week or so. So yeah, I can take questions if we're, Mr. Chair.
All right, so what do we need to do as council, or what would the direction to staff be for this item?
Well, essentially, we're in a state of emergency, and we have the autonomy to move ahead with this in the current state. But we want to make sure that we shared this with council, and in the terms of reference, we'll look at, say, it'll be circulated, and we'll have it come back in a couple of weeks for approval. And obviously, we'll look for feedback from everybody here, as well as a representation on the task force with a member of council.
Okay, great. Councillor Dwyer, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Through the chair, I mean, I don't have any concerns with this in principle, and Sean's right. I mean, declared state of emergency gives great autonomy to decision making in this respect. But I am wary of the accessibility of our resources and where we are deciding to direct them to, particularly given the discussion that we had to start off tonight's meeting. So I want to be conscientious of balancing where our resources are going, if you know what I mean. And it's I get that right now it's an unprecedented hardship for our local businesses, and my heart breaks for them. And as much as we can be out there supporting them, as much as we can, I mean, I think there needs to be a little bit more. But again, I'm worried to commit too much financial resource to that respect without fully appreciating what resources are already out there. But also limiting our ability to provide assistance elsewhere. So I look forward to receiving the terms of reference and hearing kind of what the options are going forward. But I mean, I think it goes without saying, Mayor Panko, that we would appreciate being kept in the loop regardless of the autonomy, and also, you know, wear a big picture hat on where our resources are going to be going in the long term. And I know that you get that.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. Essentially, the task force will be forming recommendations to come back to our decision-making body, which is council. So certainly no financial commitment through this process. It's more a matter of the ability to pull the pieces together, to get the stakeholders involved, engaged, to get a discussion going, put some structure behind that, and to come back with a set of recommendations for council on anything further we may do or may want to consider when it comes to supporting our business community.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna, and then Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor Panko, is the focus, and we'll see the terms of reference, but is the focus around business Or can it, as Councillor Brennan talked about earlier, the residential sector is feeling the pain as well? Can it be as broad as including that conversation under the task force work?
The task force is focused on the economic and business environment in town. Not to say that there can't be efforts maybe in parallel to consider further support for the community. Other places have done a form of task force regarding food security, and as you're so aware, councillors and members of our community have already been engaged in providing. So without having the structure of a task force. So this is really designed and focused primarily on the business community at this stage. Doesn't mean that if this pandemic continues and these restrictions continue, that we may need to form additional task forces to deal with other issues within the community.
All right, so Councillor Brennan.
Thanks, and thanks, Mayor. I think it's a great idea. I think that you know, going forward, to keep lines of communication open is very important. I think that also that you know, as part of the task force, is to open lines of communications with upper tier, because I think that that's where the money's coming from. It's going to come from, yeah, I mean, as we don't know what the future holds in terms of 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. And this, you know, if we're into 12 months, then, you know, hopefully we're not. But, you know, I'm watching the press conferences every couple of days. I think that the Premier, for one, is ready to start slowly letting things come about. In terms of, we talked about garden centers today, and you know, golf courses are coming. So I think that the important thing is for people to remember that they have to keep their distance. So, you know, as long as we have open ears and are listening and trying to help out, what we talked about earlier tonight is a more of an immediate thing. And you know, in my view, what you were talking about is a long term. And you know, an open communication going forward. So I look forward to seeing the terms of reference. Thank you very much.
If I may, good point, Councillor Brennan. And part of the impetus to sort of push this discussion over the finish line was a video conference I had with Minister Sarkaria last week. He's the Associate Minister of Small Business Red Tape Reduction. And he's been to our community before. He's familiar with the community and the story of our history. Very supportive of hearing from our business community as well, and seeking feedback, as well as trying to understand where the gaps are. And I think that sort of the final impetus to say, okay, we really need to do this.
Yep, and then you've got with this task force, then you have a voice to use to get to him. So that's great.
So we will ask, we'll survey council to see if anybody's who's interested in participating, and confirm that in the next couple of days.
All right, thank you, Mayor Panko. Any last questions, comments?
Not for me.
All right, thanks for the update and bringing that to us tonight. We'll move on to 8H, library staffing report from Councillor Allen.
Oh,
you're muted, Brian.
Sorry about that. I want to talk to you this afternoon about our library and its staff. I sit as council rep on the library board, and I'm an active member of the Friends of the Library Committee. As well, I've been speaking with the board chair and members. I was led to believe when we were told the library wasn't an essential service, all municipalities were laying off staff and closing their libraries. This is not the case, as some have kept staff looking after their libraries going forward. Karen, our head librarian, has been in the library maintaining the building, emptying the book return, and talking to users, looking after the website and Overdrive, and helping people use e-books and e-learning systems, especially now when they can't get books out. And she hasn't been getting paid for it. The library board was supposed to pass a resolution showing their support for the declared emergency response from the town. This wasn't done. Amanda Gurin, the board chair, and I would like to have Karen and Deborah working in the library in order to keep our website and the communication with the public that's so important. Also to look after book returns and help people with ebooks and e-learning. As well, this is the time they need to apply for grants to maintain our summer program. And this year, given the fact so many children haven't had schooling for a very long time, our summer program, our reading program in particular, is so important. How we're going to deliver this and safely protect staff and patrons will be a priority. I've spoken to Dr. Paula Stewart, and she's offered to help with the safety protocol if we move forward with this. I didn't think I should mention this before because I hadn't really talked to the board, but the library is such a critical piece of our infrastructure, and it's so widely used and loved in our community. It just seems a shame that people can't get to be able to use it. And so I just want to open that up. I'd be happy to have staff look at whether or not I'm right or wrong. I don't know how many municipalities are keeping bare bones staff so that their library can function and get their grants and so forth. But I hope we can do this. I think it's very important. Thank you.
Chris, you're on.
Sorry. I just had a question before we get into the discussion because I don't have a ton of experience with the library board, but my understanding was that the library board operated similar to the police board, where we assign the budget and then the board decides on the operational side of staff and how that money's going to be spent. So I'm just wondering is that the case? And then from a council perspective?
Well, they have it's called SOLS. It's a Southern Ontario Library Board. It's an association that guides all libraries, municipal libraries. And so they sort of set the standard. They do a lot of e-learning. They do a lot of our guidance around how we move forward with our library. And they felt, or they're telling people, at least bare bones, it needs to have a CEO, which is a head librarian in a library. But I'm not sure how it relates to the police, Chris.
Well, just
I think it's probably similar.
Doesn't the library board, if they want to keep staff on, is that a decision the library board gets to make, or is that a decision the council gets to make?
That yes, they feel it should have been brought to them to keep that, but that didn't happen.
Okay. Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks. Yes, I said this last week. I was really disappointed to learn in the council meeting that we had laid off staff because that really is that's a service level question. And it's one that council not only has a right to know of, but a right to be involved in making a decision around. And as Lorraine said, I too have been actively using the library services since COVID started, only to find out that our library staff are working but unpaid, which just seems so wrong. I think there should have been discussion with council. I think most of the boards that are involved in this, CDC included, I as a chair on the CDC board had no idea that we were talking about laying off staff. And it wasn't a mandatory requirement. I mean, it does free up the opportunity for those staff members to go on EI if they are officially laid off, but there's no mandate for the municipality to lay off staff. So I think communication could have been better on that in a lot of respects. And I would second Lorraine's recommendation to reinstate those two full-time staff members who are in the library and are working hard. There is no reason that they should not be fairly compensated.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. CAO Morris.
Yeah, so what I can share with council is that when the province made the decision to identify essential services, the non-essential ones had to close, and so that was a decision the province made. So the town then looked at that and said, okay, if we're not delivering the service and we're not getting revenue for that service where we normally might, then as a method of cost control, we felt it was important to control our costs. So that's the decision we took across the organization. And in the case of library staff, the full-time staff were able to access income supports, and the town committed to topping it up to the maximum amount. So that was done in an attempt to maintain some income security for the staff that work there. But certainly if the change or the need has evolved at the library and we need to add resources, then that's obviously something that we can do. But we were involved in that decision because we felt it was necessary to control costs so that we're not in a deficit position at year end. And that applied to many services, not many, but several services that were deemed non-essential. We closed the service. The CDC is a bit of a outlier to the extent that we were able to get funding to reopen it. So we hired most of the staff back. And I say most because we're only, we're operating on a lower volume of registrants than we normally do. So it was purely a cost control. We felt as a management decision, it was important to control costs, particularly where we aren't delivering services.
Thanks, CEO Morris. Councillor Dwyer, did you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Yeah, respectfully, I don't accept that answer. I mean, we don't accept any revenue for the library service in particular. Daycare is a different discussion, but in the library, we're not accepting any revenue or losing any revenue through our closure. And we could have taken that opportunity to be really creative in how we interact with our community and deliver a service to them that right now is really needed, as is the daycare. Our daycare, our personal daycare, is doing online learning for students throughout the day. And that's how they're interacting with their students. And I can't tell you how much my boys look forward to seeing their teachers and their classmates on a daily basis when they don't understand what's happening right now. The library in particular has a fantastic way of interacting with the public and could very easily be done in an electronic function. And instead of looking at those creative ways to deliver the service, we simply cut it. And again, I reiterate, that's a discussion that council should have had. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. We've got Councillor Alfred and McKenna up, and I just want to ask my question again because I'm still unclear. My understanding is that cutting anything at the library isn't a council decision, it's the library board's decision. And CEO Morris, can you just explain to me how the relationship between the library board and council works and how the funding goes back and forth?
Yeah, so the library makes a request for funding and council approves or denies that request. But at the end of the day, any deficit because of COVID is your responsibility as a council, not the board of the library. So we took a management decision based on what we thought was an important need to cut costs, particularly in an area where we weren't delivering service. And I can tell you our approach is very much consistent with what many municipalities did with non-essential services.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alfred?
Yeah, when the emergency was declared, I don't think libraries were identified as an essential service. Is that correct, CEO Morris?
That's correct.
Okay, so then it seems to me the decision to shut down operations at the library was the correct one in that moment. If things have evolved since, and Lorraine, did I understand you to say that something was to come from the board to the town asking for that situation to change, and it didn't?
Yeah, well,
okay.
We haven't had an opportunity, Councillor Alfred. We're going to meet virtually on the 15th. Okay. And at that time, they'll provide a motion that they'll put forward and ask you to honor. Okay. But tonight I brought it up because I just thought we could talk about it. And it's important, I think, right now that our librarian is serving the public right now in that way. People are still
wanting. The situation has evolved, and maybe we need to revisit it, which I think the CAO is acknowledging that we can do that. But this has evolved over the course of 2 months. So before we start chastising or trying to decide who did what when, if the situation has evolved and the library board and the librarian and her staff are working, then I think then all of us would be open to having that discussion. For me, when the emergency was declared, it was essential or not essential, and operations is the purview of the CAO, not council. That's all I'm going to say.
All right, thank you, Councillor Alford. Councillor McKenna.
Well, maybe it's similar. None of us have been through this. This is unprecedented. We are a state of emergency declared. We make decisions. It's a little early to be looking back and saying, why didn't you and why didn't you? I think we could always do better on communications. Absolutely. I think at the end we'll have to reflect back and see that. We were making these. No employer wants to lay off employees. Nobody. There was no joy in anybody, and no one's saying that. But the very difficult thing staff did, I believe, and the mayor under state of emergency did, and made the best decisions they could in the circumstances. Support them through that. As Councillor Allen, I think it's a great idea to raise this back again. If the library board has ideas, I look forward to hearing them, and I'd welcome the opportunity to reflect on how we can get things as back to normal as we can as soon as possible.
Great, thank you, Councillor McKenna. Councillor Brennan.
So the staff that are not being paid are at the library. They've accessed funds for the CERB, and we're topping that up. Is that correct?
That's correct for full-time staff, yes.
So what's the difference? Is there a big difference in what they're receiving?
Well, the maximum an employer can top up is to 95%.
So they're receiving 95% of their wages now?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Dwyer.
Yeah, what's the impact to their OMERS pension and the contribution by the municipality on their OMERS pension? Are they losing their pensionable time and matching contributions from the municipality while they're on EI, just as you would if you were on mat leave?
I'll have to check with our HR advisor on that, but my understanding is benefits, including OMERS, have continued, but I will confirm that.
Thank you, CAO Morris. Can we also get confirmation that if somebody is working and on the CRB, we're not going to get into hot water on that side of it? I'd just like some more confidence on that area. I think I still don't have a great understanding of the library board, because before coming into this meeting, my understanding was that the library has a governance board, and the governance board is responsible for making operational decisions. Ultimately, we're responsible for the final budget, but the same way we wouldn't go to the police chief and be telling him, you know, how to manage his staff. I don't think the town has a role to play managing the staff at the library because it's got the governance board. So I would really appreciate a memo just to get us up to speed on what the town and the library's relationship is and how that goes back and forth. Mayor Panko?
Yeah, let's go back the week of March 16th, I believe it was. And the province laid out a number of I guess, policies that here's what's essential, here's what's not, here's what will close, here's what will stay open. And as we move through this pandemic, we understand that this is likely to be extended in some capacity. We will follow the direction of the province, obviously, and our medical officer of health when it comes to best practices and policies that must be in place to ensure safety for staff and residents. But at this stage, if there is an opportunity for our library to continue to provide service to the people in our community, and And obviously when people are home and housebound to a great extent, access to books or ebooks would be, I'm sure, very valued and appreciated. So understanding this may last for a while, I think it's prudent by the library board to be creative and come up with some ideas that we can consider. At the same time, I think staff had to look across the board and say, here's what's essential, here's what isn't essential, here's what we will make some changes, and if we are full-time staff, and we should not be getting into specific people or discussing HR matters really in a council meeting, but across the board, if full-time permanent staff are able to collect EI and they're able to be, and we as employers are topping them up, I think we're treating our staff quite fairly through this. And I think the impact, the numbers of staff involved have been fairly modest, as much as they are impacted. And if we're able to top them up to 95%, I think that's a good action and acting with a good degree of compassion and do what we can to support our staff during this critical time.
Thank you, Mayor Panko. So, Councillor Allen, is will we get a report back from the library board after they have their meeting?
Yeah, I'm hoping next week, so I can bring that back.
So we'll expect an update on the 19th.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for the discussion. That's our last item for this week's Committee of the Whole. So if there's no further comments, get a motion to adjourn. Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Alford. All those in favor? Motion is carried.
We probably need maybe a 5-minute pause for council.
Yes.
Everybody get Okay. Everyone signed and ready to go. Okay. So good evening and welcome to this regular meeting of the Smiths Falls Town Council for Monday, May 4th. Again, a virtual meeting. We have everybody in attendance this evening. I only have one announcement today, and it relates to the reason why you may notice many members of council and staff wearing red this evening. So it's in honor of Red Dress Day in memory of murdered missing Indigenous women and girls. In past years, we had Flora Riley, who attended as a delegation to council to remind us of this important cause, to help raise awareness in our community and the deep and longstanding concern over this issue. And of course, Flora had lost a sister to a domestic violence incident many years ago, but she has helped carry the banner on this issue and helped us get a deeper understanding and help us do our part to raise the level of awareness. So it's an issue that impacts all Canadians, and certainly a heightened awareness and a deeper understanding can help elevate efforts that can lead to attitudinal and of course physical changes. So we ask that on May 8th, which is a day we have traditionally honored Red Dress Day, that you take a moment to acknowledge Red Dress Day and, if possible, hang a red dress or a garment, perhaps in front of your home, in order to show a symbolic gesture of support for Red Dress Day and Flora, and of course, the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls who have been impacted in our history. And that is it for my announcements. I'll ask for disclosure of monetary interest on today's agenda. I hear none. With no delegations, we have adoption of minutes, which is with Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Alford, that the minutes of the April 6th, 2020 and the April 20th, 2020 meetings of council be approved as circulated.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Alford, that the minutes of the April 6th, 2020 and April 20th, 2020 meetings of council be approved and circulated. All in favor? That's carried. Reports. Okay, I've got our Brady Bunch visual here across my screen. I'm going to start with Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. Just one report, actually, and it's a follow-up from a question that Councillor Allen asked earlier tonight. It was about the availability of access to the Real compost site. I can confirm that Real has opened their compost site, or will be very, very shortly. They're in the process of putting up some signs about social distancing to make residents aware, but that is going to be planned to be up and running for the summer. So thanks for asking the question.
So it includes their garden as well, gardens, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Councillor Allen. Any reports? No, I need your audio.
No, none. I did do a virtual meeting with the Cataraqui Trail group that I've just recently joined. And one of the things I will bring to another council meeting for a priority issue was around each section of the trail have volunteers that repair it and keep it up to date, as well as just doing some things to it to make sure that it's going to be usable and in good condition. And they ask for each group to give $300 for a year, and that just maintains the trail. So I will be bringing that to a priority issue, probably on the 19th, I guess. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Keeping with the Women on Council, Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of things. One is Councillor McKenna and I joined Linda McKenna and a group of people visiting under Linda's leadership. She recognized that while we are all supportive of our healthcare professionals, there was a group who had not really been recognized and highlighted. So she took it upon herself to gather businesses and individuals together and made a visit last Thursday to Willowdale. The PSWs are sort of unsung heroes looking after our elders right now. We know that long-term care facilities are hard hit in Canada, in Ontario, and in our general area. So this Thursday, Linda and her group are going to be visiting Van Horn Manor. And so the three facilities that we have for some of our most precious assets are older people. It's to appreciate them and let them know that the community hasn't forgotten about them, is thinking about them, and also to support the PSWs who work in these facilities, who are doing so, like many other healthcare workers, they are at risk. And she wanted to bring some joy to their day and some recognition to their lives for the contributions they're all making. So I applaud Linda and the group that organized that. The second thing is that, what was the second thing? Oh, Councillor McKenna and I have been working with Rideau Community Health Services and the Lanark Community Programs. And since our last meeting, those two groups in partnership with the town have been able to launch a delivery service for the food bank. And it's an important piece of the food security in our town. And that delivery service, for those clients, families, and individuals of the food bank, if they wish to get in touch with the food bank and note that they'd like delivery, orders will be taken up to 12:30 on Wednesdays. Sorry, 12:30 on Tuesdays, and delivery will be on Wednesdays. It's been fairly well used so far, and if demand rises, then Lanark Community Programs and our CHS can increase the number of delivery drivers that we have. So very much appreciate the leadership of those two groups to get involved and help where they can. And I know that our town appreciates that. And much as the Big Brothers Big Sisters are doing with the shopping and delivery service, this is another way in which the town and some of our groups here and in the county are supporting the efforts for food security. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Allen has a question.
Yeah, how is the resource, like the food supply that they have there? Councillor Alfred, how is that? Like, are they in need of food items or money to help with that program?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak for the food bank board itself, but I can say that there's been substantial amounts of money funneled from various places, including the province. So I think in terms of dollars and cents that they're able to manage. From speaking with Natalia, sometimes it's difficult to source product, and that's been one of their challenges to now. But for more information, I would refer you to the food bank themselves.
Okay, thank you. But thank you for your involvement in that, both of you. It's great. Thanks.
It's been a joy.
Councillor McKenna. You're in the middle of my screen. You're the Alice of the Brady Bunch.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Just next Wednesday, the Community Services Committee of Lanark County will be meeting virtually again. As you know, I had been briefing the council on the redevelopment of Lanark Lodge over the last year, the considerations that they're looking at. Given the COVID crisis, and in particular, the impact on the residents of long-term care across the country, and indeed across North America, I'm joining a chorus of people who will be raising with Lanark County next week and going forward as we redevelop our long-term care residential system, because obviously something needs to change drastically. We have a system that was set up where hospitals used to support people with serious chronic health conditions. Now it's the long-term care system. So we've never really, we've not modernized our long-term care residential system. and they're paying the price in this pandemic for that. So I'm hoping as we redevelop Lanark Lodge with our partners in Lanark County and with our partners in the province, that we find new ways of delivering that care so that this will never happen again, that if a pandemic breaks out, the most vulnerable and the people, it's a very complex issue. I don't propose to have the answers, but I will be sharing our voices to say that we need to do this very differently than we are now. And as Lanark County redevelops Lanark Lodge, we need to think about new approaches, and we'll be, all of us are concerned about those seniors. And so just wanted to flag that. I'm not seeking anybody's support. I know you all agree that it's been devastating what's happened in long-term care sector, residential sector. So I look, now Lanark Lodge, just to say, has been the least impacted of almost any nursing home in Eastern Ontario. It's been both fortunate, good management, and I think the fact that it's publicly owned and operated contributed to that. So thank you. That's all.
I think well said. Councillor Brennan.
I have nothing, but I do have a quiz at the end in announcements.
Okay, we'll come back for the quiz. Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to thank our local police association for delivering a hot turkey dinner from Country Diner Restaurant with desserts from Say 2 to our first responders, hospital, fire, and paramedic workers in our community last week. So even though they're on the front lines, they're still finding ways to give back. It's a great effort on that part. Another side, Parkview Homes has contacted the Municipal Heritage Committee to talk about the Rideau Hotel. And I'd like to thank Mary and Carl for getting us lined up to have our first e-meeting. There's going to be a test meeting this week, and then we're going to hopefully process their application next week so that if all goes smoothly, hopefully we can get something to council for the 19th. Just a way that the MHC and staff are really working hard to move things forward and keep things going at as a normal pace as possible. That's everything for tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That's it for reports. We have two bylaws this evening. Our first one is with Councillor Alford, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McKenna that a bylaw to lift part lot control respecting the lands described as Block 10 of Registered Plan 27M-83 be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you. It is moved by Councillor Alford, seconded by Councillor McKenna. Part lot control, lifting bylaw plan 27M-83, block 10. Wording to depend. I'm reading the wrong agenda here, sorry. One moment, please. The bylaw to lift part lot control respecting the lands described as block 10 of Registered Plan 27M-83 be received for the first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? That's carried. Discussion, Councillor Alford?
Yes, Your Worship, as discussed in the Committee of the Whole prior to this, this is setting up Block 10 to have the same approvals as we did a couple of weeks ago for, and actually working up 2 months, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So this is just continuing the work that Parkview has set out for themselves, and yeah, that's it.
No, thank you. Go to third reading, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McKenna, the bylaw to lift part lot control respecting the lands described as Block 10 of Registered Plan 27M-83 be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10144-2020.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Alford, seconded by Councillor McKenna. The bylaw to lift part lot control respecting the lands described as blocks 10 of Registered Plan 27M-83 be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10144-2020. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. On to bylaw 7.2 with Councillor Brennan, please. Audio, please, Jay.
sorry. Moved by myself, second by Councilor Alfred, that a bylaw to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw number 608094 be received and read a first time. Taken as read.
Thank you. It's moved by Councilor Brennan, second by Councilor Alfred. The bylaw to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw number 6080-94 be received and read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? Carry. Discussion, Councilor Brennan?
Yeah, we just discussed this. This is going to allow a RV to be parked in on residential lots to accommodate people working on the front lines to self-isolate outside of the home and protecting their families. So it's a great initiative.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Alfred?
Just one note that I think Carl made it clear in the report that this wouldn't be just for
No,
frontline people.
no, it's during, you can't differentiate. It's just during this time, 14 days after the emergency is over.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, may I have a third reading, please?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Alfred, that a bylaw to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw number 608094 be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 101/45/2020.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Brandon, second by Councilor Alfred, that a bylaw to amend comprehensive zoning bylaw 6080-94 be now read a third time and finally passed, signed, sealed, and numbered 10145-2020. All in favor? That's carried. That's it for our bylaws. Our first motion is with Councilor McGuire, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councilor Dwyer that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls received the 2019 Water Pollution Control Plant Performance Summary Report as prepared by the Manager of Water and Wastewater Treatment.
Thank you. Discussion, Councilor McGuire.
This is an annual report, part of the province's reporting requirements that make sure that our system is up to standard and we're putting clean water back into the Rideau River downstream.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Thank you. I'll call the question. It's moved by Councilor McGuire, second by Councilor, oh, sorry, I missed
Dwyer.
Second, Dwyer, sorry. The Council Corporation of Town of Smith Falls received the 2019 Water Pollution Control Plant Performance Summary Report as prepared by the Manager of Water and Wastewater Treatment. All in favor? That's carried. On to Councilor Dwyer.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McGuire, that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls authorize the Mayor and Clerk to approve the optional one-year extension for contract number PW-22-2019-20-E4 with Cargyle Salt, a division of Cargyle Limited. And further, that Council accept Cargyle's offer for a 7.5% reduction in price, being $105.87 a ton for the coming 2020 and 2021 season.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilor Dwyer?
Thank you. So we enter into a bulk buying contract for our salt for winter maintenance through the County of Lanark, which provides us with a premium rate for that salt. This is an extension of that existing contract, and because the salt price this year is anticipated to be lower due to a number of external factors, Cargyle has offered us a 7.5% reduction in what they're estimating the price of salt to be this year.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. Moved by Councilor Dwyer, second by Councilor McGuire, the Council of the Corporation of Town of Smith Falls authorize the Mayor and Clerk to approve the optional one-year extension for contract number PW-M-22-2019-20-E4 with Cargyle Salt, a division of Cargyle Limited. And further, the Council accept Cargyle's offer for a 7.5% reduction in price, in brackets, $105.87 a ton for the coming 2020-2021 season. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. Inquiries or announcements or quizzes? Councilor Brennan.
Okay. I have a quiz, and it's a little Smith Falls trivia, and I'm looking at Councillor Allen should know all these answers. First of all, what Smith Falls business opened in the 1920s but wasn't successful due to the invention of plastics? Nothing? It's the Smith Falls Button Factory. This building, built by Matthew Ryan in 1892, was a hub of the community until the 1920s. In the 1950s, it was the clubhouse for CP veterans. Thank you, Dwyer.
Okay, Councillor Dwyer, you have something you want to add here?
Yeah, are you sure? Does anybody else have a guess? Wasn't that the market building?
You're correct.
Yeah.
You get the prize.
Okay, Wendy's going to get this one. What major reunion took place in 1925 Smith Falls with a week of activities, including a Beckwith Street dance?
Hold on, wait.
Councillor McKenna had his hand up first.
I remember
We just
76.
gave them.
Was it 76?
Yes.
Finally, what sport became hugely popular in the 1920s in Smith Falls and even brought American players to town? Kent, they played against Johnny Halpin.
Councillor McKenna. Hey?
Peter.
The international beer drinking contest, wasn't it?
No.
No.
Councillor Alford.
I think it was curling.
Wrong. I said Johnny Halpin.
Baseball.
That's
Hockey.
right.
Hockey.
Baseball.
Hockey.
Baseball.
Should have said naughty league.
Ah.
Those are my announcements.
Okay, Councillor Brennan, we will expect this to be a ritual as long as we are operating virtually, okay? Thank you. Motion for adjournment is with Councillor Allen, please.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McGuire that this council adjourn its proceedings at 7:45 and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor McGuire. This council adjourns proceedings at 7:45 p.m. and stands so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and stay safe.
Good night.
Take care.
Bye.